Welcome to the Big Life Podcast. I'm Neal Oates Jr. here with my partner in progress, Mr. Robin Lewis. How are you today, sir?
Hey, Neal, I'm doing great, man. It's always good to get together with you, sir. That's the truth.
So, Robin, today we're speaking to a very specific person, not the person who disappears when things get hard, not the one who needs a motivational push to do the basics. This is for the person who is already consistent. You show up, you do the work, you've built habits others only talk about, and yet the results still feel underwhelming. So here's the headline. Sometimes consistency isn't the problem. And Robin, this is a real ache for high performers who are tuning in and listening to us today.
Yeah, so the question is, I'm doing the work. So why isn't this working? Why am I not seeing the results? Neal, I've been there. It really is, a good question, actually. This type of frustration, it hits differently because it feels unfair. It feels like, why is this happening? I remember crying out to God one time, Neal, in my office. I mean, literally tears to my eyes, because I felt like I'm doing it, and usually when you're consistent with something, it pays off. You get the results that you're expecting. So when the results don't match the effort, it creates an invisible spiral, am I missing something? Am I not good enough? Like, why? And that's why it was literal tear coming, because those are the things that were coming to my mind. Is my timing off? Is there something wrong with me? And what makes it even harder is that you can't blame it on effort, right? Because I'm doing the effort. You're already doing what most people are not willing to do. And so the real question becomes is if consistency isn't the issue, then what is the issue, right?
And Robin, that question is the breakthrough, because people who lack consistency often only need motivation. If we can just get them moving, we're good. But people who already have consistency typically need a strategic adjustment. And this is where a lot of disciplined leaders get trapped. They keep increasing intensity when what they need is better alignment. So today we're going to separate effort from effectiveness. And so, ladies and gentlemen, here's where we're going to start. We're going to start with the lie, not a lie coming from Robin and I, but here's the lie. If I just do more, I'll eventually break through more. And so the lie that we believe is that more effort will fix misalignment. And unfortunately, it won't. If the strategy is off, more consistency doesn't solve the problem. It accelerates the wrong direction. Ouch.
Yeah, it's true. And somebody who is disciplined is most vulnerable to this type of thing happening because consistency has been their pattern of success. And so the instinct is to push harder. I'll tighten up. I'll grind a little bit longer. And most times that works, right? Because that's what's helped them to create success, because they've been good at that in the first place. But that can turn excellence into exhaustion. Sometimes the right answer is not more effort. That's the point we want you to first hear. Sometimes it's a smarter target. So it might need a shift, a change. And so, yeah, that's what we're going to talk about today.
So as you just mentioned, Robin, we've addressed that lie that more effort might be the answer. So now let's look at the shift. And so this is going to be those 5 non-consistency gaps. So if consistency is not the issue, what might be one of those gaps? So we're going to organize this into something usable, because that's what the purpose of the Big Life Podcast is, not to just give ideas, but to give us something that we can actually use. So when your consistency is strong, but your results are weak, the issue often lives in one of 5 places. Now, not only these 5 places, but typically it's in one of these 5 places. We have positioning, environment, leverage, messaging, and feedback loops. I'm going to repeat those once again. Positioning, environment, leverage, messaging, and feedback loops. So let's break these down. I'm going to start with the first one, positioning gap. So you can be consistent and still be invisible, right? Robin, that one hits me, right? I can be consistent and still be invisible. If your market can't clearly explain what you do and why it matters, your consistency becomes background noise. So here's a quick test that I've run that has been beneficial for my life and my business. If someone asked your ideal client, what does Neal do? Would they answer in one sharp sentence? Or would they say, well, Neal, I don't know. Or Neal, he's a great guy and does this. If it's not one sharp sentence, there might be a positioning gap.
Yeah, that's so important. And that's something that I can benefit from is being more clear, and not just for my sake, but for the sake of others to answer a question like that, because that actually is how things are multiplied, right? If people can share with clarity what Robin does, then they're going to do it, and it's going to be better for me. I'll have more reach, more opportunity to serve and help people. But if people can't repeat your value, then they probably can't refer you. Or if they refer you, they're not going to refer you well. And, they can't advocate for you. And they won't remember you when an opportunity shows up, when they don't have that clarity. So the lack of results may not be based upon effort. It may be based upon definition or clarity, if you will.
You're absolutely correct, Robin. So that's going to be the position gap. But now let's look at the second gap, and that's the environment gap. Sometimes the issue isn't what you're doing, it's where you're doing it. And so some of you are consistent inside environments that cap your growth. And I know, Robin, that's a very big thing for you and I, thinking about, is there a lid? Is there something that's restricting our growth? So some of us are trying to expand in circles that normalize playing small. A few episodes ago, Robin and I talked about changing our environment. And that does not mean that it is that we don't appreciate, but we've outgrown those things. Some of us are trying to lead in cultures that quietly punish ambition.
Ouch.
So this could be, see, Robin, I knew it was going to hit you because it hit me too, sir. And this could be in the workplace. This could be at home in our family situations. It could even be in our churches or our faith organizations. So some of us are trying to lead in cultures that quietly punish ambition.
Wow. So I think that's true. We might underestimate how often the next level is delayed, not by ability, but by proximity. And that can look like self-sabotage on the outside, when it's really environmental resistance. So, the wrong rooms can make the right person question themselves. Right?
Okay, Robin, let's pause right there. And I know when you, at the opening of this, you were talking about that spiral, that negative spiral. When the consistency isn't paying off and effort isn't the answer, then you said we start having those questions. Am I doing something wrong? Am I the issue? What's wrong with me? And now all of a sudden, we're not questioning the thing that we're doing. We start questioning ourselves and our value, our worth, our knowledge. That's a dangerous place to go. Would you agree?
Yes, sir. And, yes. And that's, I really have struggled with that. Like I've shared with our listeners, I've shared with you, Neal, obviously, that sometimes, I'm uncertain or insecure. I hate to even say it at
It's
my
true for
age
me
and
too,
stage.
sir.
But yeah, so that can then play on that, right? And so that's where the spiraling effect can come into play. Because if you already have that tendency, then just give me the reason to back that up, right?
Yeah. So,
So
ladies
yeah,
and
that's a
gentlemen,
real thing, man. That's a real thing.
make sure that you are conscious and intentional about your environment. So, Robin, let's move on to gap number 3, the leverage gap. Now, this leverage gap is a silent killer because you may be consistent with tasks that are too small. You're winning the day, but losing the direction. Maybe we're getting stuck in those things that are beneath, and not ego or pride, but are beneath our operating ability.
Yeah, and this one shows up, when our calendar is full, but the outcomes are flat. We're not getting the outcomes that we want. So we're busy, we're doing a lot, but are we doing the right things? Right? Oftentimes we're busy, but the needle is not moving in the direction that we want it to. And so consistency without leverage can be a form of stagnation, because like my dad, he asks me a lot, like, oh, you're busy. You're going to be busy today. You're busy. You're busy. You're busy. He always asks that. And, my answer to him is, yeah, I'm busy, Dad. But the question is, am I busy doing the right things? Right. And so that we have to be careful of that, because it's very easy for me to be busy, but not busy doing the things that is going to create the results that I'm expecting.
Robin, especially for our audience who are high achievers, high performers, those who are desiring more. If we're not careful, we will allow that leverage gap to come into place because we're holding on to those things. And we've talked about control a lot of times versus empowerment, and how do we lead with trust and confidence and not try to control everything. So that leverage gap can come into place when we think that we have to do everything. So that's one that we want to pay close attention to. And that's why I said that leverage gap is a silent killer, because it feels good to be needed and to be moving. And Robin, I know you asked me, you're like, hey, is this holiday season keeping you busy? Are you running around? And I'm like, nah. Like, then I start thinking about, what am I doing? And I'm looking at my activity record here on my desk. And I said, did I do my number one thing yesterday? And the answer was yes. Did I do number two? The answer was no. I skipped down to numbers 5 and 6 that should not have even been on the list, if I'm being totally honest.
Yeah,
And so
I've been there.
thank you, Robin, for helping me adjust my plan. And so I will be executing differently today. So now let's look at the fourth gap, and that's the messaging gap. You could be consistent in your brand and content, but if your message focuses on what you do instead of what they get, you'll attract attention without conversion. And this is not only in business, we're also talking about the leader, right? Especially to the leader. If you're saying, well, here's what I do as a leader, and not what the benefit is to those that you are leading, what they get from it. We always talk about that, what's in it for me. If we aren't communicating that message properly in the terms of the listener, we could be getting attention, but not converting that into real action, movement, or momentum from our teams.
Yeah, and you do very well at this, sir. In my observation, as I see you out there, and it's an area where I need some work on. I've been advised as such by my coach, but this is where
Wait, Robin, you are you still getting coaching, sir? I thought we were past that. Haven't you learned enough?
Yeah. Well, we've talked about it before. I think you're asking that question for the benefit of our listeners, and to our listeners, I don't think it ever ends. Actually, Neal, I think that's an ongoing thing.
Yes,
The more
sir.
that I learn and go and grow, is the more that I realize what I don't know, and the more that I recognize the need to continue to learn and grow and change. I believe that life is about that, actually. It's about transformation. It's about evolving into becoming a better version of myself. And so, yes, sir, I do. And it might be a Robin thing, Neal, but somehow I don't think so.
I don't think so.
I think that's a human thing, actually. And our potential, we have such amazing potential, but it doesn't just happen like that. And so, yeah, but I think here the key there. So for me specifically, I'm out there trying to add value, but where I have to be careful of is not just seeing that people recognize it as adding value, but they're seeing me as the one with the authority to actually help them to improve in these areas of their life. I think that's what you're talking about. So, where I can get stuck, where people can get stuck is in the likability, right? We're getting likes, but we're not seen necessarily as the authority. I actually had somebody, this is funny, but I actually had somebody that reached out to me who is quote unquote a LinkedIn expert. And that was their feedback to me. So this is somebody I don't know, but they're a LinkedIn expert. and they were saying the same thing to me, that if you can tweak some things here or there, Rob, I think that people can see you more as the person that can help them with this. And you're not just talking about it, but you're the person that can help them to actually do something with it. And I think that's what you're talking about. So, you can become respected, but not selected, right? So messaging that hits outcomes is what turns consistency into demand. So why would somebody engage with you? It's when you can show them how you can help them to achieve this outcome in their life. Yeah. So I'm learning the same thing right now, Neal.
Great stuff, Robin. And here's what I love about the Big Life podcast is that, ladies and gentlemen, we're bringing you things that we have experienced and that we are experiencing in real time. And so we're talking about these 5 gaps that might be showing up or preventing you from achieving the next level of success results when consistency is not the issue. So let's look at the 5th gap, and that's going to be that feedback loop gap. And feedback is something that we thrive on and something that we look forward to. And in fact, Robin, you and I, we have a feedback meeting coming up so we can see how we're doing with this Big Life podcast and see what changes, not if, but what changes we can make to the podcast to deliver even more value so then people can see us as authorities in this space. Because what we've learned is that consistency without honest feedback becomes routine. Routine without correction becomes a plateau. And so here's what we want to say to you all, but also to ourselves, that without real mirrors, that honest feedback, you can stay disciplined in the wrong direction for a long time. And here's what I want to add. It can be that like we've been moving in the direction, doing the thing, having routines that have yielded results in the past. And so we've been disciplined doing this thing, but now it just is not working. And maybe success has been the fog on the mirror that keeps us from receiving that new feedback, Robin. We knew what we looked like 2 years ago. So why do I need to check the mirror of feedback today? I know what the mirror said 6 months ago with the results that I was achieving. So why do I need honest feedback today? And I think that's a dangerous trap as well.
Man, I can think of so many times where that's been needed in my life and I've received it, and sometimes acted upon it sooner than later. And sometimes I've needed to hear it a few times before I actually acted on it. But then the other side, which I've also shared with you and our listeners before of this, that I struggled with too, is I am one of those that struggled with giving feedback that to help people to grow, to get better. The reality is that high performers need accountability that doesn't flatter them. They need clarity that doesn't coddle them. My tendency was to coddle them, Neal, and encourage them is what I would call it. But feedback isn't criticism. That's just something that Robin needed to learn. And that's one where I have gotten feedback over the years, and it took me a while to actually hear it, learn it, and implement it. I call it, you can be supportive, but you also have to challenge. And here's the idea. You're not like discouraging somebody. You're not criticizing somebody. You're helping them to make a course correction. You're helping them to actually be a better version of themselves. Sometimes people can't see. It's like me. If people didn't come and speak into my life, I probably would continue going in this direction and not realizing that I was actually keeping people back. And so we need to welcome feedback into our lives.
Robin, even as you say it, and we know it to be true, we still don't necessarily love it unless we are serious about moving to the next level in life and becoming that better version of ourselves. So I want to ask you, and it always surprises me when I find out or hear something new or get a different spin on it. As someone who welcomes feedback and you want to grow, what was the gap between I can receive feedback, I can receive correction, I can even receive criticism, but giving it, sharing it, because I know your heart is to help those grow around you. So why was there a reluctance? What was it, a feeling thing? Was it a belief thing that made you hesitant to share the feedback with others that would benefit them in the long run?
Yeah, such a good question, because there might be people out there that struggle with this like me. So I think it's good to actually speak it. I think, like I want to be graceful. I want to give people a second chance. And so sometimes I get the feeling like, maybe I can just overlook it. They'll do it differently next time. Or, we're not all perfect. Everybody messes up. And so I want to be that guy who is, forgiving, offering grace and mercy and so on, right, Neil? And I think that's the underlying of it. I also want to be that guy that encourages people. Sometimes when you point out where somebody can do something differently or better, it might come across as discouraging. It might come across as criticism. And so I think that's how you say it that matters. But I would lump it in that's what's going to happen. Right? They're going to get discouraged, and it's going to be more detrimental than good. So those are the kind of things that I use to rationalize. I think it was a blind spot for me too. I wasn't seeing the fact that I was actually hurting them. And so I think that's another part of it too, is that I was blinded to that. I didn't realize that I was actually hurting them. And so that's, I think, a part of it that our listeners might relate to, is that you have to consider the fact that not only are you not discouraging them, and yes, you can still be a person of grace and challenge people because you're helping them. But the truth is this: if you don't do something about it, you're actually hurting them, and you're hurting the people within the organization as well. And
Absolutely.
So being open to that, recognition of that, is what helped me to actually make changes.
Robin, thank you for sharing that. And ladies and gentlemen, make sure you lock in and listen to what he said, because that's why we are here on the Big Life Podcast. So in that vein, let's continue, because Robin, we love to get practical. We want to share things that can help us be better, help our audience be better. So let's give 5 practical moves that our audience can apply immediately. And so we're going to take these one at a time so you can hear both angles. All right. So move number 1 is tighten your positioning. And so when I say tighten your positioning, I'm going to encourage you to use this framework. This is the framework that I have used for years in my business, even in my personal relationships, just so that people knew how to refer me, or when someone asked, what does Neal do? They had a clear answer. And I know you talked about clarity multiplies, Robin. So for my framework, I say help blank. I help who achieve what so they can, and then that's the ultimate outcome. And so, for instance, I help homeowners achieve the highest price so they can move to the next chapter of their lives, right? So whatever, if it's personal, professional, relationally, just use that framework. I help who achieve what so they can, whatever that ultimate outcome is. Because here's the reality. If you can't say it clearly, your audience can't repeat it confidently. And we know that if someone tries to refer, or someone tries to answer a question, and if they say, or they start looking around, or they think, we as human beings, we are immediately distrusting of whatever it is that they're going to say.
And I think what you're after here is you're after a sentence that your ideal client will hear, and they will relate to it instantly. They'll say, that's me. That's what I want. That's what I need. Right? So you don't need a perfect sentence. You want a relatable one. You want the sentence that when your ideal client hears it, they relate and put themselves in that place. So you just need a functional one, is what I would say to people. I struggle with those kind of things, having the right one, like, I mean, there were times where for years I'm trying to figure this out, Neal, for years. And I'm not kidding you when I say that. But And it's okay to work on it, though, by the way. So I want to say that to our listeners. You might not get it right the first time with that sentence. And so you do want to work on it until you get it to that place. But the point that I'm making here is that it doesn't need to be a perfect one. Now, I remember hearing from one of our mentors, Chris Robinson, Neal, when he said, he helps. So this Chris Robinson, just for our context, is the executive vice president in charge of Maxwell Leadership, and he is directly over the 1,000 coaches, speakers, and trainers. Okay, so just so you understand who I'm talking about, you would think that he would want to have a perfect sentence when he shares what he does. But I remember him saying on a call, Neal, is that I help leaders develop leaders. That's what he does. I help leaders develop leaders. And so it doesn't have to be a perfect sentence. We want to have all these fancy words in there. And here's somebody that has worked his way to where he has become the leader of 59,000 coaches, speakers, and trainers by using that line. Mm-hmm. And so it doesn't have to be a perfect sentence. It just needs to be functional. Leaders want to, help in developing leaders. And so people relate to that.
Yeah. And so I think that's beautiful, because we think that the higher up it goes, the more complex it is. But the reality is, the clearer and the simpler it is. And that's what communicates authority, that communicates so much when it comes to overcoming that gap of our positioning. So now let's move to move number 2. And this one might be a challenge for our audience, because we are great people who care about people. We're empathetic, sympathetic. But move number 2 is to audit your environment. And we can't stress the importance of environment enough. But we're going to encourage you in this move of auditing your environment to categorize your relationships. And so I look at FNF. Is it fuel, which means that it brings me up? Is it neutral, where it just sort of keeps me hearing the same? Or is it friction? And so anytime that really, and Robin, I'm going to say the neutral part, I don't really think that it's neutral. I always think that it's fuel or friction. But here's what I'm telling you. You don't need to cut people off. You do need to stop expecting empowerment from people who feel threatened by your growth. Right? So I'm not saying go and say, all right, do the Facebook post, I'm eliminating our friends who don't respond with an encouraging word to me. We're not saying do that, but we do need to be aware of those that fuel us and those who create friction in our lives. So wife and I, we have a blue nose pit named Ash. And so something like Ash is a fantastic dog, right? She does everything she's supposed to do most of the time. But we have this saying that we have to let dog. Like, there are just some things that a dog is going to do. And no matter how much you discipline, you chastise a dog is going to roll in the dirt. It doesn't matter if we just bathed her or not. So what we had to do is exactly what I'm encouraging you to do. To stop expecting a dog not to dog. Stop expecting empowerment from people who feel threatened by your growth. For us, that would just be crazy. Why would we expect them to support us, to lift us up, when they're threatened by the people or the person that we're becoming?
I love it, Neal. I just actually grabbed my notepad and wrote that down. I don't think I've ever heard it before, and I like it. FNF. Right? So you're gonna categorize your relationships. You're gonna consider your relationships. Does it fuel you? Is it neutral, or is there friction? I love that. I believe this is also a maturity test, because sometimes friction people aren't bad people. They're just not assigned to your next season. Right. And I think we have to have clarity around that. Show me your company, I'll show you who you are. Right. It doesn't mean that they're bad, but it means that they're not going along with you for this next season, for where you're headed. And so we have to, make some moves, be aware, and make some changes in regards to our environment.
Absolutely. Oh, did you have something else, Robin? I apologize.
No, sir.
All right. So move number 3 is to upgrade your leverage. And this is where we just simply ask, what am I doing consistently that a system, template, or a delegate could handle? right? This is where we have to release that control. And after we answer that question, here's the hard part, ladies and gentlemen. We must reclaim time for higher leverage moves. I call these my DPAs, my dollar producing activities. And we're not talking about just dollars and money, but what are the things that I can delegate, have a system or a template to do that now I can reclaim my time for those dollar producing activities to move me or to move that needle that Robin mentioned a little bit more.
And there are some people in my life that have really challenged that. I think of people like Paul Martinelli. He was a mentor of mine for many years, and in ways still is. Even although we don't have that much direct contact now as we did a few years back. But like he talked about the fact, Neil, that he doesn't put gas in his car. He doesn't go to the store to buy stuff. He doesn't go to the post office. A lot of things that, quite frankly, I still do. I still put gas in my car. But he's challenging what you just said. He's challenging me to recognize that there are a lot of things that we do that we should have other people doing so that we can spend the time on the higher leverage moves that we should be working on. And so that's still a work in progress for me. I think it also includes being aware of your emotional leverage as well. Sometimes you might spend energy proving things to people that aren't in a position to help to reward your growth, right? So sometimes you're explaining things that you're doing or explaining why you do things and so on to people that, if you get right down to it, it doesn't really matter. And you have to also be careful of that and not get caught up in that as well.
Robin, I am loving these practical applications to fix or correct those 5 gaps when consistency is not the issue. So now let's move to practical application move number 4, and that's going to be rewrite one message for outcomes. And so our ask or our encouragement is to take your most common explanation of what you do and rewrite it in payoff language, not your method, not what you do or how you do it, but let's write it in payoff language, which equates to their outcome. What do they get out of it?
Yeah. This is the difference between being interesting and being necessary, right? Outcomes that make you relevant. Relevance is what creates demand, right? So it's not just about being interesting, but it's about being necessary. It's a good point.
Robin, so now you're talking about relevance creates demand and outcome make you relevant. And earlier you mentioned that if we're not careful, we could be respected but not selected. So you're dropping them today. And so as a business person, as a salesperson, someone who makes money from producing this thing that helps others improve and impact their lives, this hits me, right? So many times I've been stuck in that friendly but not authority, right? Likable, but not the authority, where I have been respected, but not selected. And this is where that messaging comes into play. So thank you for reminding me of that. But the final move that Robin and I are going to share is move number 5. Install a weekly feedback check. So we're going to have to look in this mirror weekly at a minimum. And just once a week, we're going to slow down. Okay, we're going to reflect. This is where Robin has really helped Neal here. Once a week, we're going to ask what worked, what stalled, and what signal am I ignoring? Maybe we add to that what one adjustment would make next week 5, 10, 20% better. And I think that only comes from us slowing down and looking at the results that we either got or that we did not receive, and then being honest with those answers.
Yeah, that's so true. And that last question is powerful, because you're not trying to reinvent your life every week when you do this. You're just trying to, find small strategic improvements that over time compounds. And that's how consistent people become unstoppable people, is that they're stopping and analyzing how they're doing. Is what they're doing being effective? And it's something that as we move forward into 2026 here, Neil, that I need to be more intentional and focused And what it means for me is taking the time to make sure that I am lasered in. So that's a change, for example, a little tweak that I know that I need to make, right? And that's an example of feedback that we need to just stop and take a step back and take a look at what we're doing and see what adjustments that we might need to make for improvement.
So now that we have those 5 practical moves, we're going to go ahead and bring this to a close. And so if you're consistent and still not seeing progress, please do not assume that your discipline is failing you. Your consistency is your engine. What you may need upgrade, well, what you might need to upgrade is your positioning, the environment, maybe your leverage, your messaging, or your feedback system. And here's what I want you to hear clearly from me and from Robin is that this isn't a character crisis. It's a strategy moment, right? So this is where it's not you. So don't go down that negative spiral. And so I want you to sit there and say, all right, I just need to have a moment to slow down, reflect. Let's look at strategy. Let's not take it internal. I think that it has to do with my character, my value, or who God has made me to be. And so, Robin, I just want to tell you that this conversation has been a timely conversation for me to start off the year. And looking at this here, it has been phenomenal, sir.
Absolutely, sir. I agree. And I hope the disciplined listener hears this message clearly. You're not behind because you're not trying. You may be behind because you've outgrown the current design. And that's we're speaking from experience here. I've been there and been the one that's cried and wondering if it was me and what am I, maybe I'm not good enough for this, or why is this happening to me? Only to recognize that I needed to make a few little changes here or there to actually help my consistency bring more results.
So, ladies and gentlemen, Big Life Podcast listeners, your next step is simple. Not easy, but simple. Pick one of the 5 gaps and work on fixing that this week. Because here's what we know. One adjustment can unlock a wave of momentum, especially as we go into an entire new year full of hope, optimism, and possibility. So Robin and I, we want to tell you thank you for listening to the Big Life Podcast. Be sure to subscribe, share, and comment. We will respond to each and every comment. So on the behalf of Mr. Robin Lewis, I want to remind you that we love you, God loves you, and there's nothing you can do about it. And until the next time we see you or you see us, we're right there with you. Peace.
Peace.